Oh, we're back at the Glass Museum. We were hoping to make our own art, but we didn't realize you had to make a reservation for a time slot. And we're kind of short on time today because we're heading back home as soon as we're done here. So we're gonna go look around some more.
Alrighty, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Flameworking area. My name's Caitlin. I'm working on little imps and angels today. So there's a couple of them sitting right here, one with wings, one with a little devil tail and some horns. And this is another one that I've started here. And I'm using a technique that we call flamework to shape the glass. So you can see why this is called flamework. I've got a big open flame. The torch is burning a combination of natural gas and compressed oxygen, and that produces a flame around 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Very hot flame, but the oxygen is pushing the heat away from me, and so there's not a lot of heat radiating out from the sides. You can see I can have my hands pretty close to that really hot flame without being unsafe, and that's one of the reasons I'm able to work so close up and do such detailed work with the glass. The other reason is that glass is very insulative. Heat doesn't travel through it very fast. And so even though parts of this glass get up to 3,000 degrees while I'm working, that's the melting temperature of this particular glass, the part that I'm holding actually remains room temperature. And so this is my favorite glass making technique because I can do really delicate detail work. So let me hold that up to the camera. If you look up at one of the big screens on either side of the gallery, you'll see I've got a little angel character here. Not quite finished yet, but you can see if you look close, there are stripes on the dress. It's blue and white stripes. We've got tiny little hands and tiny little feet, and it's standing on a little sort of glass marble. Now this is eventually going to be a bottle stopper. And so this is the part of the stem that will go down in the bottle. This is going to get attached to the top. And I'm going to just keep these in the oven for the time being to keep them hot so they'll be ready when I get ready to attach them to each other. But in the meantime, I will make a little wing for the angel so you can see how that part of the process works. I take advantage of some interesting characteristics of glass to do this, and one of those is that when you melt glass, it kind of naturally wants to pull into a round shape just because of its viscosity and the surface tension as you melt it. And so we start each step of the way with a round bit of glass, and it's called a gather. So right now I'm gathering up the glass. A lot of times when I first heat the glass rod, it will bubble a little bit at the end, and so when you see me pulling a little bit of glass off and throwing it on the table, that's why. Or it could be that I'm reshaping the end of the rod for some particular purpose as well. So I'm softening it up, rotating it in the flame. That gets it nice and evenly heated. And as it softens, of course, gravity is pulling that glass down toward the table. So to keep it centered on the end of the rod, I continue rotating it. And as it softens all the way through, it does want to be almost perfectly round. You can actually make a very beautiful, almost perfect round marble out of glass without actually touching it with any tools, just using the heat and gravity and the glass rods to do it. So we're letting this part firm up. That's our gather. And I'm going to heat up some white glass to put over the surface of it. Glass softens very gradually as it's heated. So by working with different parts of it at very different temperatures, so right now that's hard and this part is really soft, I can get it softer or harder as needed for the shaping process. And so you can see with that white glass really, really hot, that's up to its melting temperature just at the end, I can push against the clear glass gather and apply that white almost like really thick paint. So we're covering the white and then we're going to melt that in. I like this particular white glass because it's a little bit translucent, and in the rod you don't really notice it 3/8 of an inch thick, it looks pretty opaque. But in a thinner application like I have here, it allows some light to pass through it, and so our wing is going to have kind of texture, so it'll have thick and thin areas, makes a really nice kind of luminous effect in the glass. And that's one of the things that's unique and interesting about working with glass as an art material. It has all the kind of standard aesthetic qualities of most art materials, like color and form and surface, but it also has, to some extent, transparency. Not every glass is transparent, but a lot of them are. And so you're thinking, when you're working on a design in glass, you're thinking not only about how the surface will look, but how light will pass through it. So we're flattening that a little bit. This is called a crimping tool. I'm holding that up to the camera so you can see on the inside of there, there's a ridged texture. And so if I soften up my wing and squeeze it with that crimping tool, I can create a nice ridged texture on the wing. So glass flows into round shapes when you melt it, softens gradually. Once it's melted, it's very stretchy. And so you'll see me alternating, letting the glass flow together to make round shapes, manipulating the shape in different ways. I can attach bits of glass as long as I make sure that both the surfaces are hot enough that they flow together, and I can stretch it. And amazingly, that's pretty much all you can do. It's beautifully simple to work with glass because you have to work with the natural movement of the material. No matter what technique you're using, those are the characteristics that you're working with. Did you have a question?
How does glass not melt?
How does glass not melt? Yeah, good question. So this part is melting because I'm keeping it right in the middle of the flame. This one, I'm just heating it a little bit. So like, think about a grilled cheese sandwich. Have you ever had a grilled cheese sandwich?
Yeah.
If you heat up the cheese a little bit, it starts to get soft, right? But if you get it really, really hot, then it's almost liquid. It gets super soft. And glass is kind of similar to that too. If you get it up to the melting temperature, it's going to be softer than at just a slightly warmed up temperature. And so I'm heating different parts of this different amounts to get them softer or harder. So I'm adding a little bit of white to that, and I'm heating the wing, not enough to melt it because I don't want those ridges to go away, but just enough to get it soft, because that's going to allow me to use the white glass rod that I've got attached there as a handle to stretch it. Can you see it stretching almost like cheese?
Oh yeah.
So we stretch that out and then let it cool enough that it firms up. And I'm going to put another handle on there and then take the handle off that I am holding on to right now. So this is firm right now, but it's hot. It's about 1,000 degrees. So I don't want to grab it with my fingers. But I will put a very delicate attachment on the tip of the wing so that later when I go to remove that, it will not require a long period of heating to get it off of there. So if you think of questions as I go along, feel free, just call them right out to me. I'm delighted to answer anything that you'd like to know. You just have to speak loudly because it is sort of muffled in the booth. There we go. So stretching that out. And then the next, so I'll hold that up to the camera too so you can see it. So there's one wing, and then the next challenge is to make another wing that matches it before I attach it to the body. This is a new design for me. If you look in the display case over there, you'll see some little elves. I was making those during the winter sort of holiday season. And right now what I'm working on is imps and angels, same kind of structure, but I'm going to be doing a live stream demo for the museum next month that's a collaboration with the glass blower. So she's making bottles, I'm making bottle stoppers, and we're making imps and angels to go on top of them.
Oh, nice.
And so that's what I'm working on here. So the wings, I just started working on the wing design yesterday, which means that it's one of the most fun parts of the process for me right now, which is I'm still fine-tuning it. And so I don't always get them as beautiful as I like. And every time I make one, I think about, okay, how can I make that more graceful? How do I make sure that it matches the other wing? How am I going to attach it? How big do I want it to be? And so a lot of times people ask me, well, what's your favorite thing to make? And my favorite thing is usually whatever I'm not quite satisfied with yet, because there's the process of trying to fine tune it. When you know it's going to be pretty nice, but you haven't quite figured out how to get it just the way you want. That's one of the most exciting parts of the process. So here's another gather, just kind of estimating that it's about the same size as the first one. We'll add some white glass to that. So in the display cases, you'll see other flame-worked objects, and you'll see there's a really wide range of things that we can do beyond even what we've got in the display cases with this technique. But all of them are made using those same simple steps: the heating to get the glass soft, the cooling to let it firm up, attaching bits and stretching them and letting it flow together. And the strategy when you're figuring out how to make something is to figure out what steps to take in what order, how many times you have to repeat them, and how you're going to get your nice stable attachments in the order of your steps, and maybe how you're going to get the object to balance and stand up once you're done with it. So it's a beautiful sort of puzzle to work out a design. When I'm heating the glass, I'm watching the color of the glow of heat in the glass, and I'm watching the movement of the glass. And when I get ready to flatten this, I want it to be soft all the way through. And I can tell when it's soft all the way through because it becomes very graceful. The shape becomes very smooth and graceful. When it is still kind of firm on the inside, and since glass is very insulative, it does take a while for the heat to soak all the way in there. So when it's a little firmer on the outside than the inside, or the inside than the outside, if you try to flatten it like I just did here, it ends up making a kind of a lumpy shape. But once it is nice and evenly heated all the way through, then you can get it to flow into a more graceful shape. And so you watch the movement of the glass and the color of the glow of heat, and I can feel it a little bit too in the glass rod. When the glass is really evenly heated, it will kind of center itself on the end of the rod if I'm rotating it nice and evenly, and it will feel more balanced. And so those are sort of subtle, sensory responses that you can have to the glass when you've spent a lot of time with it. I've been working with glass about 25 years, and one of the things that becomes more and more clear to me over time is the more you can let the natural movement of the glass dictate the shape, the more graceful of a shape you can get. And so, of course, there are tools, and I did just use that crimping tool on the wing, but if I can let the glass flow into a shape, it's going to make the glass more beautiful if I've heated it just right. And if I heat it wrong, it makes it sometimes very ugly.
Could you, say you crimped it and you didn't like the way it was crimped, could you reheat it and redo it? Or?
Yeah, I could. To get a really good result, I have to melt it all the way back to its gather state, so that oval state, because otherwise there's still going to be some evidence of the original crimp in the glass. That's one of the sort of differences too between when you're doing work in a studio or when you're making objects, in other words, as opposed to when you're doing a demonstration, because there are times when I'm doing a demonstration that I'll just continue working on something when if I was concerned about the outcome, I would have stopped and started over again. But it's not always fun to just see the same thing repeated once you've seen it. So for instance, you probably can't tell, but where is it? I have a little, oh yeah, this one, this is it. I was working on that yesterday while I was doing a demo, and it cracked. And there's all kinds of cracks in there right now, so that's gonna eventually go in the trash. But for being able to see what I'm working on, that's perfectly
Good enough.
for looking at. Yeah, and so it's a lot of it has to do with sort of timing and intuition and response to the glass. Well, those are pretty close. That's not too bad. So we'll keep those as a pair. Now I'm going to keep working on this and parts of this for the next 15 minutes or so, and you can all stay as long as you like. Ask me anything you want to know about this. And basically I'm going to be doing, you know, all of those same steps that I was talking about. In this case, I'm going to heat this up and twist it to make a stripe pattern like you'll see on the pants there. And then